Back when Dennis Miller used to be funny, and reporting the news on Weekend Update on Saturday Night Live, Jack Kirby had died, and he reported the death like this, roughly. I don't have the exact wording, and I won't do the impression. He said that Jack Kirby, comic legend and co-creator of Captain America and the Fantastic Four, died this week, but don't worry. According to comic book traditions, he'll be back next year. That's a pretty funny joke. What he was making fun of was comic book creators' habit of bringing characters back from the dead over and over again. However, that habit, that action, has actually become a joke in and of itself. Now, death and returns were pretty much the primary function of villains. They often did it. They'd die mysteriously in explosions or helicopter crashes or fall off bridges and shit like that, and then return months later or a year later or something like that, you know, with a quick speech on how they came back from the dead or how they avoided death and just faked their death and shit like that. And now they're back for revenge. And that, you know, was pretty much how it went. Years went by, of course. Superheroes got a little less popular during the 50s, and many people thought that superheroes were fairly unrealistic, which is actually a fair criticism. That they always seemed to beat the odds, a lot of times at the last second, doing their best to beat adversity. They'd always make it. But of course, we all know real life isn't that way. We saw real life heroes like John Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Robert Kennedy all die one by one, taking our hopes and dreams with them. And Marvel understood this, which is why they saw their in. For not only more realistic characters, but more realistic situations. For instance, as far as death is concerned, Captain America, when he first came back, after being frozen since World War II, he woke up to the news that his teenage sidekick Bucky had been killed during their last mission. Soon, a few years goes by, and we see more things like this. Gwen Stacy, Spider-Man's girlfriend, was killed off by that rat bastard, the Green Goblin. Thunderbird of the X-Men gets killed on their first mission. There's the graphic novel, which I think is the first graphic novel from Marvel, The Death of Captain Marvel. Talk about a spoiler right in the title. He dies of cancer, I believe. And of course, Jean Grey, Phoenix, commits suicide in order to save the world and the universe from her own, you know, horrifically powerful, you know, abilities. Now, notice a similarity between all those stories. They were all Marvel books, and the fans noticed it too. During the late 70s and early 80s, DC had really been losing ground with Marvel. Marvel had really just become an upstart and just took over the industry and became #1. And examples from fans and critics, they would often give that Marvel was more realistic, and they would always cite deaths. Death of Thunderbird was a big favorite to suggest, in Phoenix death as well. So DC, of course, having to keep up, tried to reboot things with the Crisis of Infinite Earths. And you all know that that was the big miniseries that rewrote their continuity and also killed off a number of characters, even big names like the Barry Allen Flash and Supergirl. And they started something that they would later call Legacy, and be a big fan of it. I'm not quite crazy about Legacy myself, where sidekicks would replace the original heroes, like Wally West replaced the Flash, and another character, I think Matrix, a shape-shifting alien, took over the Supergirl role. And the second Robin, Jason Todd, was killed. He died in Death in the Family, and that was voted on, actually, by the fans. And he lost out by a slim margin. It was very close from what I understand. Matter of fact, the creators didn't even expect fans to really do it, but they did. They killed Jason Todd. Now, this was an event, but it came out of a natural series of events because fans really started to take a disliking to the character, and he became very controversial, so this is how they settled it. And also, a few years later, DC would kill off another major character, Superman, because his sales were lagging. He's the cornerstone of superhero universes, not just DC but Marvel, and his sales weren't anywhere. X-Men were just everywhere at that time, Spider-Man as well. So to compete, He came up with this 2-year storyline, the death of Superman. Then it became World Without a Superman. Then, of course, the reign of the Superman. And the design was to make you appreciate what a good character Superman is and how important he is. And mission accomplished. Their sales were up. They had a whole slew of new fans. And of this, of course, didn't happen in a vacuum. So many other people noticed, both on DC and at Marvel. And you saw a whole bunch of different characters killed or replaced over and over again. That was a big thing in the 90s. And it's kind of, there's something that's happened, I've watched over the last 10 years. And I actually have my complaint with crossovers, I have discovered when thinking about this video, is very similar to my problems with death and returns of superhero characters. Is both, matter of fact, crossovers often result in the deaths and resurrections, even sometimes in the same crossover. Both involve the editors and creators rewriting of the status quo at the time. And that usually takes a few months to process the story. And there's a new continuity that we have to set up. Then the character is sorely missed and then brought back after 2 years or some sort. And then we break down that status quo and rebuild it fresher and neater, maybe with a little mix of the status quo before and now. And that seems to be a repeating process every 6 months to 2 years with a number of different characters both on Marvel and DC. I just noticed this over and over again, and it's not so much stories about adventure and horror and action and sci-fi. It's all stories that are basically the creators rewriting continuity for themselves, and it's happening on page instead of, I don't know, it's just, I wish the stories were about more than watching them fix their own mistakes or fixing things to better suit their needs. It seems like over and over again it's happening. And I mentioned Bucky earlier. Bucky, of course, was killed. He was brought back as the Winter Soldier. Now, he replaced Captain America after Captain America was killed after Civil War. And he's been Captain America for, I think, almost a year. I haven't really been paying too much attention, maybe a year or a year and a half. And now Captain America has come back. The problems with these continuity stories, as I've been thinking of what they've been called, is they really throw it in your face that it's just fiction. Why get upset that Bucky died? Why get upset that Captain America died, or Jason Todd, or let's see, or Batman, or Superman, or any of these characters? Why get upset at all if they're just going to bring them back? It does take the emotional punch of all these stories, and makes you even wonder why you're even reading. That's just my feeling on it. Because, like Joel Hodgson just once said, it's just fiction. Push the button, Lindsay.